Hey all, welcome to day 6 with my newest Mustang, Odyssey. On this day I started some desensitizing with the ribbon wand. When I first entered his pen, of course, I spent a little time refreshing him on what he learned the previous day, picking up his feet, etc. I don't like to jump right in and just start teaching something new right away. I find that's hard for them, and so I just start filming when I begin working on something new. So to start with, I was just having him follow it and look at it. I had all the ribbons rolled up so it would be less scary for him. And here I just waited a few seconds for him to reach out and touch it, and then I rewarded by taking away the ribbon wand. I repeated this process a few times. I like to have my Mustangs follow something that they may be afraid of. I find that it teaches them curiosity, and then I like to have them reach out and touch something. This is called target training. Eventually he's going to learn that the word touch means he's meant to reach out and touch something scary, and then he gets a reward. And there's a lot of other reasons and ways to use target training, but that's the most common way I like to use it with my Mustangs. I like to do a lot of positive reinforcement, so as soon as I can start hand feeding him some treats, that'll be even more encouragement for him to learn the touch cue. He tends to like me to start touching him with something new on his forehead, so that's where I began. He was a little unsure at first, but as soon as he realized it was kind of the same feeling as the stick and string, he was okay, and that startled him a bit. So I just had him touch it and realize it was okay. Sometimes the ribbons flapping in the wind can kind of startle them if they touch them unexpectedly. When I'm getting a horse used to something new, I like to take it in small enough doses that I don't freak them out and put them over threshold, at the same time making sure that they're not just going into freeze mode and shutting down. And so I want to look for signs that they're attentive, that they're actually processing what's happening and not just going internal. And so I'm watching his expression and I'm making sure that he's really thinking and gradually learning bit by bit with every release that the scary object is not going to hurt him. Every time I release by taking this scary object away, he thinks, okay, it didn't hurt me that time, and he gains a little bit more confidence for the next time I bring it back. This time I practiced taking it away and putting it back over his neck and shoulder instead of starting at his head again. He did really well, and I'm gradually letting the ribbons kind of unfurl themselves so the object gradually becomes scarier and scarier. When I introduce something new, I start with it in its least scary possible form to help to build the horse's confidence so I'm not throwing them in the deep end. So I repeated that exact same process some more, giving some big releases and letting more and more of the ribbons out until we got this. And one of the ways that I make sure that they're engaged and really learning when I'm desensitizing them and not just kind of standing there and taking it is I try to move them in between exposing them to the scary object, and eventually I'll work up to moving them while the scary thing is on them, because the way I see it, they can't really shut down and go into freeze mode while they're moving, and so I can make absolutely sure that they're really comfortable with what's happening. This also helps to get him comfortable with things dragging on the ground, which is going to be really useful for when I teach him to drag later. This mimics something that I did with the stick and string. The ribbon wands just make it a little more scary. This helps me gauge if they're going to be ear shy at all, and it also helps them get comfortable with things moving around their ears, which helps with haltering. This here is because he's worried about things coming at the side of his face. This is probably a pain response. He's probably has some pain in his mouth. Like I've said in previous videos, he's 7 years old and never had his teeth done. So I wouldn't be surprised if he has some sharp points that are poking him. So I don't work on it too much. I just want to get him seen by the dentist as soon as I can.
I do the same thing. I'm like, now don't do as I say, not as I do. Oh, really?
This was really nice, especially for his first session working with the ribbon wand, so I decided to quit on that and move to something else. I went back to a bit more refreshing him with picking up his feet. This was really nice because he was calm about it, even though he moved. That's okay for right now.
Camel lips out. Oh, we are. We're itchy.
So because I didn't have him taking treats out of my hand yet, I decided to use some scratches as a reward, which he loved. Even though he barely picked his foot up here, I still rewarded him for that, and then I just went back to reminding him that he's meant to pick up his foot back, and this was really nice and soft. So he was moving a bit with this hind leg, so instead of pushing it too hard, I just went back to putting the rope on it, and then I could pick it up with my hand again. And what I ended up doing was holding it up with the rope and then putting my hand on it and letting him feel that and realize that it wasn't anything to be worried about. Because he wasn't really letting me touch his leg with my hand to assure him that it was okay, so I just held it up and showed him. And after just doing that a couple times, he was okay with me picking it up again.
It's also little.
After a bit of a break, I decided to introduce the saddle pad to him. I had it folded up to make it as small as possible so it wasn't too scary to start with. It took him a minute and he backed up a few times, but I just waited for him to reach out and touch it before rewarding. So then I had him follow it the same way I did with the ribbon wand. I wanted to engage his curiosity and get him thinking forward instead of backing away from something he's scared of. So the next step I do is I start waving it up and down the same way I do when I'm going to put the saddle pad on them. This gets them used to the up and down motion and the sound that it makes. So I do that on both sides and just let him see it. I do it with no energy and not really focusing on him at all, so he doesn't think it's aimed at him and he just gets to observe it. And then without really making a big deal of it so he doesn't think to worry too hard about it, I just start touching him with it. I put it on and take it off a few times the same way I will when I go to actually put it on him. Here I held it on him a little too long, causing him to back up. If I had taken it away sooner, he probably would have been more okay with it.
I know, you still want to send this one. Smells like other horses. I think this is on coconut last.
I unfolded it and did a bit more of having him follow it around. This way he's thinking forward and he's moving in between desensitizing. I'm very casual about it. I don't act like it's some big scary thing, and he seems to feed off that very well. I don't just put the saddle pad where it'll actually go on his back when he has a saddle on. I want him to get comfortable with it touching him all over. In case one day somebody goes to put a saddle pad on him and brushes his butt with it, he doesn't freak out. He's used to that feeling. I always let my horses investigate as long as they'd like, so I let him sniff it in between putting it on him. So then I start moving faster and flapping it up and down with more energy. This helps him get more comfortable with it. The next thing I want to get him used to, and the reason I was using one of my own saddle pads is because I don't mind if it gets all dirty, is get him used to stuff falling on the ground and eventually falling off him. This is very important, and this is something I teach every horse before I get on them. It's very important that they don't freak out if something falls off them, and I actually aim to teach them to stop in this case, because eventually a rider may fall off them and you don't want them to panic and run away, especially if the rider were to get hung up in the stirrups and get dragged. So then I start leaving the saddle pad on him for a few seconds at a time and letting him look at it. This is another way that I begin to introduce things falling off them. Then I start to introduce movement with the saddle pad on. He's still learning the cues for lunging, and that's the next thing that we're going to work on, is refining those. So he's a little unsure, but he's figuring it out. At this point, I'm mainly focusing on getting him comfortable with the saddle pad. So here the saddle pad starts to slide off him, and this is normal, and I decided to let this happen. I felt like I'd prepared him enough that he shouldn't freak out, and he's got a good brain on him, so when it did fall off, he hardly even seemed to notice it. He definitely put an ear back, and then he started looking at it, but he didn't freak out at all, which was very good. So then after another break, I took him into the main round pen. Unfortunately, my phone fell off the fence, so I didn't catch him leading into the round pen. He was a little sticky, but he figured it out. And so we just worked on some leading and coming off the pressure. And then I started to refine those lunging cues like I talked about earlier. So he's just confused here. He's not understanding what to do. And so I'm just holding on the pressure, and he's starting to try things. So he tries going this way, realizes that doesn't work. And then he tries going left like I asked him to, and I give him a big release with the rope and just encourage him to keep moving. Now he was a bit sticky at first. His friends were over to the right in the smaller pins we have attached to the round pin, and so he was sticky through there, so I just added pressure to keep him moving and then release whenever he was moving forward freely. This is pretty normal to begin with. They all have somewhere where they want to be, and it's usually by the gate or with their friends, and so I just sent him a few laps until he wasn't being very sticky in that spot, and then asked him to stop. Because he's still learning the cues, it took him a minute to realize what I was asking him to do, and he ended up stopping in the spot where he wanted to be, so I sent him out of it because I didn't want him to rest there. Ideally, I would like to be able to stop him on the opposite side of the round pen so he gets to rest where he doesn't want to be. But I'm not being too picky on him right now. I'm just trying to be very clear in what the expectations are. So he's starting to figure out now that when I point, I want him to go that direction, and the flag is just a backup. Very soon I won't need to use the flag. And he trotted through his sticky spot very nicely. I was super happy with that, so I asked him to stop right there, and he was very soft. So even though this lunging session was only a couple minutes and it was already getting dark and cooling off, he was pretty hot because he has a really thick coat, and this was really going to limit what I was able to do with him. And so I knew I wanted to clip him as quickly as I could. Now here I got him to stop in the side of the round pen that he didn't like to be in as much, which was really nice. So I happily quit on that and called it a day for Odyssey. Thank y'all so much for watching, and thank you guys for commenting on the videos. I really appreciate that y'all are following along and enjoying this journey. Stay tuned for the next part of Odyssey's journey.